So what I've done is just a quick visual on, just to put this all in context for us. Use the slideshow. And we're good to go, hopefully. So the interesting thing really is to take a look at the two vintages, the 19 and 20, and compare them. Basically, the general consensus is they're both very dry, very hot years. But 20 was kind of a turbocharged expression of what 19 was. It was drier and it was hotter. And they also got hit by frost in October, which really messed with vine yields. The result of that was, as a 10-year average, production in Barossa in 2020 was 50% down. According to our agents, Standish was 80% down, although Aaron Larkin and Wine Advocate are coming up with 70. Now, whether it's 70 or 80 is still a ridiculous reduction in volume. The plus side for us as drinkers is the lower the volume, the higher the intensity. And for most winemakers, the challenge has to be balance and structure and grace when you're looking at this kind of sweatbox of a vintage where everything's intensified in terms of the fruit that people are actually working with. And I think in the fullness of time, 2020 is one of those vintages that people will look back on on a theoretical level and look to the winemakers who did the best, who were the best at their craft in a very, very difficult year, for Barossa in particular. So let's have a look at the first four. Maybe if we can look at jars 1 through to 4 first, because they're the ones that are showing us a little bit of vintage comparison. So jar 1 and 2 are the two Standishes, 100% Shiraz from the Laycock family in Greenock, planted relatively recently in 2002, ironstone gravels, at about 300 meters. The Krondorf, by comparison, not terribly much higher, seeing a lot, only 20% whole bunch, but the Relic is the one that gets the Viognier. Now, I'm sure from what I've managed to find out, 2020 only had 1% Viognier. I've got a feeling that in a traditional year, it's a little bit higher. But the popular thought, thinking when it comes to Barossa and it comes to Standish, in a year as hot as this, that 1% is the effect of the Viognier is compounded even more. A very tiny amount of wine. Traditionally, when you're putting it with Shiraz, it lends a certain exoticism, a certain flair to the wines. What it's doing in 2020, by comparison, because of the heat, is that its impact on the Shiraz is different from a normal year. The impact in 2020 is instead to augment the savory bacon fat, pancetta, truffle kind of flavors. So what it's doing in 2020 should be very different from what it's doing in 2019. But so let's just have a look at these 4 and see. For those who've just come late to the tasting, I've really worked these wines, the 20s, heavily because they were quite shy early this morning, but they're evolving quite well. I think the nose of the Standish 19 is probably my favorite. Let me get out of this share thing now so I can see everybody. There's kind of like a lanolin, a waxy kind of top note on that Standish, which I really love. Maybe quite a lot of orange influence on the nose, and a lot of more exotic spices. I think that's probably in the lineup. If we look back, we do look back at it retrospectively later. I think that's the thing that's going to define the Standish the most, is that exotic spice spectrum that it seems to show. Oh, intense. I guess the thing, looking at the first two, the Standish 1920 side by side, I think the takeaway on these two is I'm not getting a lot of evidence of alcohol. It seems to be well balanced, very much in sync, obviously very dense and unctuous. If I remember correctly, we've got about a case of this 19 left. I think it's evolving really well compared to, I think it would be about 8 months ago that we looked at the 19s. %30 whole bunch press in the Standish 20s, and about half of that in the Relic. So a slightly more subtle approach when it comes to the bunch treatment. I want to say that Standish 19 versus 20, the 20 has a more refined palette at this point, a more sense of flow, something that's the tannic structure is more detailed and very subtle. I think that's the winning shot for me out of the Standish 20.
Okay, Rob, hold on a sec. It's a little bit of confusion because the slides are different to the lineup on the chat room.
Let's have a look.
Which two are you doing first?
Standish, Shiraz, 19 and 20.
So you're doing the Standish?
Oh, sorry. It was up as Relic. Sorry. So what's the easiest way to resolve this? I can go back to these numbers that we've got here. So I've been banging on about jars 3 and 4. Standish 19 and 20. This is the, I think putting these side by side, it's very clear that for me, despite the fact that 20 is the year younger.
Rob, I'm going to pull you up. Start again, please. Can you do it 1 through to 6 based on the chat? What's up on the chat?
Okay. We're looking at Relic, 19 and 20, jars 1 and 2.
Okay, let's do that. Away you go. Sorry, everyone.
This is the only one in the lineup that has Viognier. What I was referring to a little bit earlier is that what's good about the Viognier what's interesting about the Viognier in this particular instance with extreme heat is that it's actually lending a different contribution to the character of the wine. It's augmenting people are talking, let me just shut that down. It's augmenting the characteristics of savoriness, pancetta, bacon, etc. And it's generally speaking, when a Viognier is blended with Shiraz, it's adding characteristics of perfume, floral, the more exotic, sensuous kind of characteristics of the Shiraz. In 20, it's actually doing something different, such as the extreme heat and the effects of vintage. Getting quite a lot more tannin in the Relics versus the Standishes. If you have a nose of jar 1 and 2, it's pretty clear how different the impact of Viognier is. In jar 1, the Relic 19, you're definitely seeing more of an influence of that jazzy floral. In jar 2, the 20, definitely more into the savory spectrum of it, the bacony spectrum. I think that Relic 19 is definitely ready to drink. I was talking to someone else on the call a little bit earlier, and there's quite a lot of differentiation in opinion on this Relic 19 as to whether it's ready. Suckling, for example, is saying it's ready now, whereas there are other fairly recognized critics that are saying it's a much further maturation curve, but I think I tend to lean towards the Suckling opinion on this in terms of what it's showing. Really great wine. There's a lot of tannic evidence in the Relic 20 at the moment. It sort of suffers because the 19 is looking so good right now. So then moving on to the Standish, we'd covered this before, but let's quickly go through it again. The Standish can be differentiated from the Relic in many ways, but primarily because Viognier is in the Relic and it's 100% Shiraz in the Standish. It really is the defining difference. They're pretty much on similar levels, 300 and 330 meters in altitude, both subregions of Barossa. The Standish comes from the Krondorf region. And so too with that Standish 19, it's beautifully approachable now. For me, I don't know how everyone else feels, but there seems to be, for me, more evidence of tannin in the Relic tonight than in the Standish, which is interesting because the approach with whole bunch, 30% whole bunch with the Standish and 15 to 20% with the Relic. Yeah, that's great. Let's have a look and see what's going on in the chat.
No, we're all on board again. Don't worry.
Okay, good.
Just learned something. If you come in late, apparently you can't see the history of the chat.
Yeah, it's annoying, right? So you've got to.
Right. A few of the guys
You've got to keep hitting.
It doesn't help that we're bouncing all over the place, doing 3 and 4 as number 1 and 2. So anyway, we're all back on track.
Excellent.
Got to say, these wines are something else, aren't they?
Well, you know what's really interesting, and I was reading, there was one commentary about Barossa Shiraz has really copped it up the Jatsi for the last 20 years in terms of, stylistically, it's called a fruit bomb. Everything about Barossa Shiraz has really had a PR problem, I would say. But when you look at wines like this, the finesse and the layering is just mind-blowing, really incredible. There certainly is power. There's no question about it. And there's no doubt that the 20s are way more intense than the 19s. That you get this feeling of it being coiled or compressed, both of these, both the Relic and the Standish. But beautiful structure, really amazing. In terms of 21, the good news is that cooler vintage production levels are back on board. So they're not going to have yet another hot year, which is a real relief for the Barossa people. To have this level of heat in 20 and be smacked around by frost at the critical time. I think to produce this level of quality is a testament to the winemaker.
Now, to your point, though, I think the first Relic I ever had was probably the 01. Does that make sense?
I think so. Well, no, because that vineyard only planted in 02, unless it came from somewhere else.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
yeah. And I've sort of had them. I remember the 03 made a big splash because Parker was all over it, and it was really up right in Parker's laneway, right? But I think the alcohol was punching up close to 16%, and you could feel the heat in the wine. It was there. You could deny it if you liked, but it was there, and I think that's what lost Barossa its appeal for most people, because whilst Parker didn't seem to mind that sort of heat wave coming back at you, and it would attack your throat in the more extreme examples. I think the general public voted with its feet and said, no, this is not what we want. And to their credit, the Barossians have listened, learnt their lesson, and have pulled it back. And you see that in these wines. The power's there, but they're not stumbling over into overripeness and overheat and all that stuff that, you know, just made you think of big hair and big shoulder pads, right?
You don't have the fear that in 5 years' time it's all going to end in tears.
No.
You don't. And I remember so many wines that one has had that trepidation, and it's proven to be right. But I don't think we're seeing it here.
Yeah. I think Barossa, I think they've learned to deal with the desire for the big, powerful notes, but without going into the overripe sector. So pulling it back from the brink before it becomes jammy.
Yeah, I mean there are nuances of like confit or a jam kind of thing in the Standish 20, but it's so it's one of 400 aspects.
Yeah, there's enough acid there to pull it back and keep it tight.
Correct. Yeah.
In the past, not so much the Standish, because I think Dan is one of the better exponents out there, but some of the lesser winemakers out there clearly went for very ripe fruit, you know, probably bringing stuff in at 25, 26 bricks.
Yeah.
Then actually hitting it with ascorbic acid in order to keep the structure in it. And I've seen that happen in the wineries in the past. And the trouble with that is, as the age goes on and the wine matures in bottle, the fruit dies away, but the acid that's there remains. And so it just becomes nasty and unbalanced. And what was a show pony before the judges getting 100 points because it's 12 months old and an absolute glamour puss, suddenly is this sour, tired old tart that you'd never want to see. It's just horrible. And it's true. That's what happens with it. But these
wines... due reference to the sad tarts in the world.
Oh, sorry. I sort of include myself in that band. But these wines are reviving my faith in good Barossa winemaking.
Well, I remember about a year ago we had a tasting with a different winemaker who was doing a lot of Viognier, and there was talks about, he was saying that in the early 2000s he was putting 10, 11, 12% Viognier in and tasting just this 1% and seeing what a profound difference it's making to the wine. It must take some real insight to be this judicious with the Viognier and to see such a profound impact on the overall picture of the wine in the glass. It really drives it home for me comparing 19 and 20 because of just how different the impact is, with the 19 being jazzy and floral and quite dynamic and sort of giddy. But in the 20, it's just creating this beautiful, savory angle to it that I think is just absolutely fantastic.
Oh.
It's so unusual to see that having that impact. I don't think I've ever encountered it before.
No, well, it's certainly a very different note to what you're getting out of, say, the Southern Rhone, which is what it's trying to emulate, but it's a different note. I think the soil structure is clearly having a big effect there. But
yeah, I'm just looking for my notes on there are very different soils. It's back in the share thing. I won't take you.
Right, well, anyway, we should probably move on to 5 and 6, right?
Yeah. So number 5 is the Lamella 20. This comes from Eden Valley, the Huttonvale farm. The cuttings for this vineyard are Edelston, and very close to the Edelston vineyard itself in terms of location. It's the highest elevation of all the vineyards for Standish at about 400 plus. It might go as high as 450. It's also the only wine that has 100% whole bunch. And again, here's something really super interesting about it, because I'm not seeing a whole lot of tannic, forceful expression from whole bunch in this wine. It's definitely prettier. And maybe that's because it's an extra 100 meters in elevation. Maybe it's something to do with those Edelston cuttings, but there's a definite sense of elegance and nuance about this wine that's different from the others. Yeah. That prettiness is in the nose and in the palate and everywhere through. It's a very different expression.
But mate, those tannins are there.
Yeah.
It's not like they don't exist. They're not overwhelming, but they are there. It's grippier than the. Don't you reckon it's grippier than the other two?
Than the Standish? No, no, I don't think it's grippier than the Standish. The Relic for me is still the grippiest of the three we've seen so far. I think when we get to the Theorem, it's all different because that's just such a big monster of a wine. But the tannins are there. But
yeah, listen. On number 5, I reckon.
Yeah.
Well,
Colin's talking about stemminess. He always uses that phrase. Colin, are you talking about number 5?
Yeah.
Yeah, he is.
No, it's because I'm getting it now. Maybe my sample got less rigorous attention than yours, but the tannins are, to me, it's much more noticeable in number 5 than the others so far. So, to me, anyway. So.
I can see why some people, there's this kind of sub-group of Standish zealots that follow Lamella as the wine that he makes every year. There's a pack within a pack when it comes to Standish.
Did he make an Edelmond? Do you know?
He didn't make Edelman this year. There's a rumor that there is one in 21, but no one will confirm it.
Where's that from?
I can't tell you now. No. The last one, number 6, is from Brownfield Road, so we're back to about 280 meters. The other thing about the Schubert is it's the only wine in anything that Dan does that has something other than French oak treatment to it. So Dan's general approach is 20% French oak across the board, which is kind of cool when we're looking at this sort of lineup, because you can kind of take that out of the equation when you're thinking about things like terroir. So a similar approach to everything. But when it comes to the Schubert, the northeastern block of the vineyard, that goes into concrete. And his rationale for that is he wants to retain the purity of blue fruit. And whole notes are written about this blue fruit core that defines the Schubert so differently from the others.
I mean, it all sounds very pretentious, but Schubert theorem, what is there a philosophy? Is it?
Again, because Dan is the Howard Hughes of the wine industry, and his website isn't far behind. I've really had to work hard at scraping this information together. It's quite interesting. Decanter wrote a whole thing on the 18s, and I was reading that, and they had to go back to a meeting they had with Dan when he still worked for Torbrick. So if it has to go that far back for Decanter magazine to meet him, I think we're lucky that we even got the wives. I think this Schubert is stunning.
Yeah.
There's a purity. There's a kind of focus, right?
It is something else.
I think it's phenomenal. The question I would put to you is this concrete fermentation for the 20 odd percent of the production. Is that augmenting the fruit component? What is that doing to make this so dramatically different? Because looking at the altitude, it's 280 meters, so warmer, should be riper, shouldn't have this level of nuance. Is that the concrete that's having such a big impact? I don't know. And also, he's not messing around when it comes to, it's 70% whole bunch, but still fairly ambitious. Yeah, Marcus, so I think that is probably quite accurate, right? So 20 is probably just a more intense expression than 19.
Mm.
Everything is just turbocharged. So if it was sweet last year, it's sweeter. If it's, if it's stemmier, it's going to be stemmy, it's stemmier in 20. Everything just seems to be, the stakes just seem to be higher.
Because I remember the 19 was a favorite when we tasted it, but now the 20, that's just a whole different one.
Did we do 18 with 19? I can't remember.
Can't remember 18.
I think we just did 19. I don't think we had any stock. Can't remember.
Yeah, I don't recall doing 18.
No, I don't think we did. I think we just did 19.
Straight line up in 19s, I think.
Oh, this is amazing, the Schubert.
Is there anything you can have these with in terms of pairing, right? Is there anything apart?
Just dive tackle a cow and
is there anything apart
take its hooves off.
What else could you possibly?
Well, it's interesting because I was at there's this restaurant in Singapore called Ovenbird, and it's a very tiny restaurant, a Japanese seafood place. Only seats about 12, and I went with some people, and I was thinking, Japanese seafood, you've got to drink whites, and so much of the Japanese cooking, not so much the fish itself, but the techniques that they apply to cooking their fish really does fine with red. And I was thinking of eel and tuna and all that kind of stuff, just fantastic. Could probably take a point of view with these.
Not with these. Bloody hell.
Oh, Schubert. Yeah, I think that has to be my favorite. Maybe because it's always that mistake when you're doing a tasting, right, as to whether one leans towards the one that's so different from the rest. Actually, by that theorem, it should be the Relic. I really love this. I think if I have it correctly, the Angus family in Eden Valley, Nicholas Angus is the current winemaker at Torbrick, if I have the history right. And Dan has been buying fruit from them for about 12 years. And it sort of underscores these Garagista winemakers that their success hangs so firmly on the relationships they have with the growers. So in every instance here, other than the Standish itself, which I think is Dan's own vineyard, everything else is contract grown.
Well, the little known secret that very few people are aware of is that Dan works with Jason Collins on the Messina label.
I think that's stopped. I think Jason is on his own now.
Is it just Jason now?
I think so.
Because that was extraordinary value in the past, right? Those Messinas, made by Dan and Jason together for almost.
And in fact, when I do the marketing after we finish tonight, the Messina is part of the summary page. If anyone wants to take it, we've got the 11.
But you reckon Dan's no longer involved in Messina?
Yeah, I'm pretty certain that Dan got out of that about 5 years ago.
Okay.
I think Jason was the viticulturist. If I remember correctly, now he's viticulturist and winemaker.
Okay.
I think he said something about it ended all really well, but they decided to do their own thing.
I think the other winemaker you're talking about, the guy who's using 10, 11% Viognier, was that Brett Grock from Eperosa?
No, I was thinking of Clonakilla from ACT, because Tim said in his early days, I think he said in his early days, he was almost a double-digit Viognier. It's pulled way back now. I think now it's about 4% or something. But he was saying when he was first messing around with it, that was the...
Well, he cut his teeth in France, right? In the Rhone. So
Dan's also done his bit with Jamais and Rostang. I think he's made wine at about 6 of the, maybe the top 10 most important.
But typically, those guys doing the Shiraz Viognier blends, the French are typically using 6 to 8%, aren't they?
Certainly a lot more than 1%. And it raises the question, why is it so phenomenally influential in Australian context?
Mm.
A lot of people, I think that the Melbourneites are falling over themselves over this Lamella. I think it's got a great point of view. I think it's pretty, but just for sheer sex appeal, that Schubert is phenomenal. To be that dark and brooding, and just, it should be more muscular, it should be more aggressive, but it's not. Instead, it has this beautiful, pure, complete fruit about it.
Do I tell you what, just from having them in the glass now for half an hour, they're putting on a show.
Yeah. Some people are saying day 3 and 4 of an open bottle.
Okay.
And the common speculation is to do, one normally does this to get a view of the forward potential of the wines, but 20 is quite different in as much as the wines are vivacious and quite ready now, plus have a cellaring window. Everything about these 20s is different from the norm.
It's going to take me 3 hours to brush my teeth after this.
So, Colin, what's giving you the love for the Lamella more than the others? Or is it just an instinctive thing?
I don't know. It just feels more elegant. It's got
more
a lot of the aromatics to there.
Yeah.
It's decent finish. I mean, the finish is good. But I just feel it's elegant. It's not whacking me over the head with anything.
Yeah.
And I like that. And I wonder. So this is the only one that's from Eden Valley, right? So I just wonder if maybe I need to hang out there more.
Yeah, I mean, even in the Wine Advocate notes, they make a big deal about this one. Firstly, because it's its own sub-region as opposed to others just being districts. For some reason, they seem to attach more kudos to that. But they put a lot by the altitude differential. I think again that's what surprises me about the Schubert is in the Barossa context, the heat variance is so dramatic between 280 meters and 400 or 500 meters. It's such an extraordinary difference. The Struy, for example, is at 500 meters in Eden Valley, and if that was grown anywhere else in Barossa, I think it might be a little clumsy. It's that altitude that seems to make such a massive difference to the wine. And I'm a sucker for concrete fermentation. I just love it. I don't know how much the Rhone winemakers are messing with that. They're probably still more traditionalist, right?
But old school Rhone is concrete, but it's just not usually shaped like an egg. So
Oh,
they're
okay.
not quite that texture.
Big blocks, big
Yeah,
concrete
yeah,
blocks.
yeah.
Yeah, though, in my recent trip there, certainly there was a lot of concrete, and I asked about, sort of egg amphora, and they looked at me like I had 3 heads and said, "Why would we want a different shaped concrete?"
Oh, because the biodynamic guys have got a big theory about that.
Of course they do.
Yeah, they lose me a little bit, but there's something about the shape and Mother Earth.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
but
sure there's a
there
book.
is something to the there is something to the shape. So I mean, the visits I've had, I mean, so you've got your normal concrete egg, which is sort of amphora-ish, and you get a lot of churn, so you get a lot of extraction. But one of the guys that I got to know had a sideways concrete egg to kind of, you still have the concrete egg thing, but less churn, so less extraction coming out, which I thought was pretty interesting.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
Makes sense.
But that would drastically
Lou's
increase.
not convinced.
Yeah, he's not.
No,
He's not buying the tickets.
It's a good theory. I don't know if it makes a massive difference, but I just think, let these guys experiment until they find the best combo. And God bless them. It's great.
The only thing I'd say about a sideways concrete ferment is it's going to drastically increase the percentage of wine to oxygen. So the entire maturation thing will be affected, wouldn't it? Unless it's totally full.
Oh no, you can still fill it. You can still fill it. So that's not the deciding factor, so to speak.
All right.
I find
But it does
I'm
take up more
full-
floor space.
If I'm full and standing, I end up being full and lying down. So the end result's the same.
So the winemaker's school and theoretical school of winemaking needs to write a paragraph on that, Lou. I think that.
All right, when you go out next time, Lou, look for people who do sideways concrete egg. Dude, it's all the rage.
All right, I'm looking for it now. I'm looking for it. I'm ready for a mission.
Excellent.
So the traditional Rhone guys, was it subterranean, the concrete vats? What are they doing with it back in the day? How are they treating it?
Yeah, just big vats in the ground usually, and and that's why they're not very mobile. They don't move wineries very often because you can't.
And is it like the Eastern Europeans where they line it with wax or some sort of covering, or is it just concrete on wine?
No, it's wax.
Wax, okay.
Yeah, but over the years, it's done different things. Fiberglass, wax, then this special paint that they devised for it, and blah, blah. Actually, I didn't ask on our last trip what they're using, because they keep on going through different cycles of what they use.
Right.
Just to have a neutral thing, because what you don't want to have is any lime, right, seeping into the wine from concrete.
Yeah, that's going to be a disaster. Yeah.
So you always try and have a surface of some description that's neutral between the actual concrete stuff, unless the concrete is specifically made without lime. But I'm not aware of anyone dying from leaching of anything. So.
Yeah. Going back to the first two, that exotic spice component from the Standish is really great.
Yeah. I'm going to be contrarian like you. I am.
Yeah.
I have put my money on, what's number 4? What's that one?
That's the Standish 20.
I'm loving it. The nose on this thing is just outstanding now. But it's hard to, it's a great lineup. It's a good lineup of great wines. So.
Sorry, can I? Okay, Standish 20. Okay, sorry, never mind. I'll shut up.
Colin, in 2 weeks' time, wine tastings, I'm house sitting 3 cats who apparently demand attention during wine tasting. So I might have to hand the wine tasting over to Lou to handle. What sounds a bit dangerous.
Well, no, my stupid cat here.
Yeah.
Times Thursdays 7:15 she wanders through.
Oh, really?
Always decides to make a lot of noise. Yeah, whatever.
It's very social. I enjoy it.
I'm curious. Obviously these things have got a different point of view.
Mm.
So I'm curious to know what people's favourite today is.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm going to go number 4, only because the nose is now just extraordinary. But before that, it would have been
Yeah,
number
maybe you guys want to throw a number in the chat room. And in the meantime, I'll answer Sidhu's question. Sidhu, heat had a big difference, a big impact. But I would probably say that the frost in October was the thing that really stuffed the vines. It really shut them down. So their growth was stunted towards that vital end ripening period. So the impact is the number of grapes was reduced dramatically and the size. And that's the key sort of formula in a vintage's particular is this. Reduction in size of the grape means a massive increase in intensity. And I guess that's what we're seeing here is all the joie de vivre of the terroir is packed into a smaller amount of liquid. So we're just getting a bigger bang for our buck. Let's have a look at this. So 3 and 5. 3. Oh no, Colin, you must vote for the 20s. You can't vote for the 19s. That's unfair. Come on, that's a loaded deck.
Robert, which are the relics? Just double checking.
The relics are 1 and 2, 19 and 20. Sorry, I balls it up somewhere in between the. All right, let's take a look. So Marcus is saying 5 and 6 are Lamella.
Yeah. The 5 was for me, when we had the last tasting, 5 was also my favorite. That's why I bought a few bottles.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So it just really comes through again.
To be fair, I think the Lamella is probably the most structured of all of them.
Yeah, I keep going back to the word finished. I think that's unfair. They're all very finished. But maybe it's the one that has the most complete form about it. The point that Erin Larkin makes, and I'm so glad she talks about this, is the impact of being on the vineyard and seeing the soil and what impact that makes on your expectation of what the wine's going to be. And she says that the vineyard that produces the Schubert is black and sparkling. And she says that somehow translates into what she's tasting in the Schubert. It's quite an interesting thought process. And she's probably just influenced by what it looks like, but she speaks a lot about the excitement of that wine, having this kind of juxtaposition, the sort of yin and yang of at one time being really linear and direct and focused and pure in one way, and in another way, the sort of dark Gothic brooding component. So it's looking like Lamella. I'm no good at counting, but I'd say Lamella followed by Standish. Seems to be the way to go. Seems to be the popular. Look, the bottom line is we've got less than 4 dozen of all of these, and I guess I should be opening this to everybody now, as promised. The only one we've got a fair bit of, I think, is the Shiraz, the Standish. We've got about 8 dozen. The rest is, so let me just do that.
And unfortunately, that's all we're going to get.
Yep. So it's officially live. Probably the images aren't there, but if you want to hit your Zoom link, in fact, I can give you that here. That's the link to the summary page of all the Standishes.
Oh.
There's a few back vintages. There's like straggler bottles of 17s and what have you as well, if anybody wants to look at it.
Yeah, and we can possibly get some more. I'm not sure.
What, of 20s? No, there's more 19. I think there's more 19.
There may be some more 18s and 19s hanging around as well that I'm not aware of.
Oh, okay.
The guys that we buy from moved warehouse and found some stuff. They're still not sure what they got.
Okay, well, that's good news.
Well, yeah, unreliable though. Just
Hmm.
unreliable. So we'll see.
Yeah, Lamella, you guys might be right. Maybe I'm kind of falling for the number 6 because of its just incredible point of view. That purity is amazing.
6 is the Lamella, right, bro? I'm
No,
messed up
6
on
is the Schubert, 5 is
that.
the
Oh, that's the
Lamella.
Schubert. 5 is the Lamella.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like Lou says, I mean, any of these are amazing.
I was just to your point earlier. I'm always astonished at how Viognier completely just, I wouldn't say
Scary,
crushes,
right?
but just tempers
Yeah.
Shiraz. Like the difference between the Standish and the Relic is very stark.
Hmm.
And it's, I'm assuming it's very, similar, the similar Shiraz grade.
I don't know about the clones, so I can't
Okay.
drill down into that. I think the soils are slightly different, but not dramatically. We're not talking about sandstone and clay, or
Yeah.
limestone and clay, or anything like that.
And just a few percentage of Viognier can really, impact the, to me, like just the structure and the tannins.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's amazing. And then if you go to different regions, you go to, Clonakilla, they do that blend beautifully. You go to the Yarra, I think there's just a few that do it, like, Yaring Station does. It's okay, but it's not an easy blend to get right.
No, I think, and what the other thing that just blows my mind is Dan co-ferments. So it's not like he's making these 2 wines and saying, okay, this is what I think it should look like. He's actually taking the decision before it's ready. Like, how the hell do you do that?
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
For me, that's the sign of a complete genius to actually be able to say, okay, this is what the raw juice tastes like. Let's throw it into a fermenter and get back to it in a month or whatever. I mean,
Is that on what, does Clonakilla do the same thing, or they blend it after fermentation?
I can't be sure now. We have. I'm leaning towards yes.
Mm.
I'm leaning towards yes. It is. I think it's sort of like a badge of courage for these guys. It's amazing. The Americans, by contrast, it's so interesting because we've tasted quite a lot of very high-end Californian Cabernets in the last couple of years, and they go down to they'll ferment by the vines. They become so obsessed with these like tiny micro fermentations, and then they'll make a decision way later. And I'm thinking of big guns like Insignia. Admittedly, not a huge production level, but they are so fastidious about looking at the final product before they make a final decision. Whereas here's a dude who's just doing it all in one go. I think it's amazing.
Genius.
Yeah, I'm not sharing your concerns about that tannin on the Lamella. I think it's there, but I think it's helping create a different flavor profile. I don't think it's, for me, the tannins, and I know Lou also would agree with you, that the tannins have a big role, right, in the Lamella.
Oh, they're more obvious in the Lamella than anything else, so it needs more time. But the one thing I will say, there's more than enough fruit to carry it through to more than enough fruit. So I'm not concerned about the longevity of it. It's the least approachable of all the wines, in my view, that we've had tonight because of that. The tannins are there; they are very noticeable, but in the concept, in the whole picture, they're not out of place. It's just needs more time. That Lamella will take more time to come around to be user friendly, whereas the others are surprisingly approachable, I must say.
I mean, I guess one of the tragedies is, such as the function of 2020 vintage, there's so little of it that the wine lovers of the world won't have the luxury of being able to do any kind of retrospectives.
No.
People in Melbourne are getting like one bottle of each, and they've got to have slept with someone at the winery in order to get it. It's insane. In fact, we probably have more of a luxury of access here than the Australians do back in Australia.
Mm.
The thing that separates these for me from so many other Barossa Shiraz is it's not clumsy. There's nowhere in these glasses is there jamminess or over extraction, or everything's nuanced. It really is the top of the tree.
Well, they've retained the acid, right? And that's the backbone of these wines. When you've got that acid, that acidic backbone that's there, and it can carry the fruit, the tannins, and everything else on its back through the journey.
Yeah.
The jamminess gets held in check by the acidity.
Yes. Yeah.
The sweetness gets held in check, and frankly, the tannins get carried by it. So,
well, the other big question I would ask Dan, if he exists, is what's the yield per hectare? That must be a huge component. Is there a lot of fruit drop? Those are things I'd be super keen to understand. Is he getting this intensity because he's at viticulture level? Is he losing 80% of the fruit and getting those vines to, really focus on a small amount of grapes? Those are the sort of things I'd love to know.
don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It certainly works.
Yeah, for sure. So next week, we've got 8 seats left for the premium 2019 Bordeaux tasting. It's the only tasting we can do of the higher echelon stuff. Lou tells me that we've managed to buy more 2019, but it's going to cost more. So,
although if the stock market keeps doing what it's doing, I imagine that price will readjust. It's amazing when you buy from the Bordeaux people.
Yeah.
How the prices.
Are they a function of the index? Are they?
Yeah, it's absolutely astonishing how the conversation that I had on Tuesday was totally different to the one I had the previous Tuesday. I guess the end of the free money era is going to make a difference to their ability to just price depending on what they feel like in the morning. So perhaps there's a bit of rigor coming back to the
Are you
market.
seeing any price adjustments in the 2021 entrepreneurs? Or are they still sticking?
Well, they've actually priced it flat to 2020, which I think is a mistake.
Right.
As a consequence, I'm buying a lot less 2021 than 2020 because it's clearly not as good a vintage, and to pay the same price as the 2020, I think it's a mistake. But when they formulated their prices, it would have been 2 months ago. S&P and everything else is on an all-time record high.
Yeah, every asset in the world is different.
Right? Fast forward to yesterday, and everyone's slashing their wrists, and all the crypto bros are working at McDonald's, and isn't that disposable trillions of dollars ready for the Lamborghini and the Hoprion? So
you see, my counter argument to that, Lou, is possibly the millennials on their Rolls-Royce skateboards and all the rest of it aren't buyers of entrepreneur.
They're not.
Maybe that generation aren't quite as obsessed as us and the older generation about wine, and there's enough entrenched money to support the basic demand for entrepreneur.
Well, the fact is that 2021 is about 30% down on volume, so they will clear it.
Okay.
The Bitcoin bros are not buying this stuff anyway, and they never did, and they never will. The younger generation, in fact, it's a big problem for Bordeaux generally that they have not been able to attract the generation to come with them. That generation is turned away in drinking.
They're drinking Padron. They definitely
gin and craft beer, right?
Yeah.
Which is a big problem for Bordeaux generally. And as the baby boomers fall off a twig or get told by their doctors you can't drink anymore, it's going to be a real problem.
So in wine history, has there ever been an inverted yield? In other words, has anyone bought en primeur and the market has ended up 20% low on release? Is there any evidence
Not
of that?
20%, but I do remember 2010, the Chinese got kicked in the nuts.
Yeah.
And 2011, they refused to take delivery on their contracts.
Really?
Yeah, because at 11, they all bought forward, right? Then they realized it was a real stinker of a vintage.
Yeah,
and so
it was horrible.
They ripped up their contracts and they walked away. So that would have been a case where if they had taken delivery, they would have been down 20-30%.
Right.
But they didn't. So it ended up that the Chateau just owned it, or actually the negotiants owned it. And if you go into any negotiant now, they've got plenty of 2011 if you want some.
So 20 is a good one to buy, 21 not so much. And
well, this is my theory, right? I think 19's outstanding, good value and phenomenally good quality. 20 was higher in price, but the quality is going to be up there. So the analogy is to 09 and 10, in terms of vintages. 21's a bit of a mystery bag. Not a bad vintage, but not as good as the other two. But they're asking to pay the same price as the 20. So
Australia, by contrast, is saying that 21 is a great vintage, great production. Yeah. The farmers will be paying for their children's education this year. There won't be any overdraft. Everyone's making money. In terms of pricing, no one knows. But there's plenty of wine coming and plenty of good wine coming.
Well, the problem they've got still, though, is that the Chinese aren't buying it. Okay.
Yeah. Penny will fix that. I've got great belief in her. I think she's great.
Penny Wong.
Yeah, I think she's awesome. I'm a huge fan.
On the basis that she's ethnically Chinese, she can sell.
No, that's terrible. No, I just think she's awesome. She's already been in the Pacific region 3 times. Let me just switch the recording off before I.
All right, bye, Ron.
Yeah. I